A business I looked at this week was cleaning solar panels. Should I clean solar panels? Is a real question I've asked myself this week. I know nothing, or I guess the average amount about solar panels. And I came up with this elaborate prompt for AI to generate ideas for me. Took that prompt, gave it to multiple AIs, and see what the commonalities were going to be. Knowing not much about solar panels, I thought I was going to look into it. So my first reflex was to do the math. And what I did was trying to understand, like ChatGPT came up with this kind of template business, like you do this, you charge them this much. And I was like trying to understand the math. So I basically told ChatGPT, I took Gemini's results, I gave it to ChatGPT, and then I did the opposite to kind of test them against each other. And then I was like, okay, cool. Explain the math to me. Like, how much electricity is this generating? What are the savings by having a dirty solar panel versus a clean solar panel? Like efficiency. Like I read it could be anywhere between 5 and 30% less production by having dirty panels, but it depends where you are, which is something I did not know either. And trying to understand, based on also the cost of electricity, like how much are you saving or how much is it costing you? Anyway, so I started doing research. I was looking at Quebec electricity prices, and then I realized there was a significant difference because we have really cheap electricity here. So I started looking at Alberta and other places in Canada and realized that the climate is not really working well for that because we have a lot of snow, which kind of does a deep cleaning effect by melting off the solar panels, and the rain, which also cleans them. So in order to have something worth cleaning, like the math for Canada, altogether did not add up anywhere. And I could have stopped there. I could have said like, well, this is stupid, let me move on. But I was like, but where would it work? And then I came up with a couple places, Hawaii and Chicago and, California region, like Fresno, where they grow a lot of nuts, basically. And that was super interesting because the electricity prices there are super high compared to here. They have a very long dry season where there's almost no rain, which doesn't clean. And the nut harvesting creates an insane amount of dust, which works in my favor because a lot of the significant solar farms have systems and companies to maintain those solar farms. But the smaller ones, no one wants to touch because they're not kind of worth the time to go. So that became interesting because automating solar panel cleanings for the smaller farms, which we're looking at 30 to 100 panels, became more interesting. And at that point, I was like kind of going with whatever I found. There was no really limitation to what I could or could not do. And then I started looking at the math again. How do I make this make sense for me? So the next step was to build forecasting. I was going to say elaborate. It wasn't elaborate at all, but still spent like 2 hours on it. Model the business. See how much money do I need to put in? What's my return on investment? Do I need like cash flow, and figuring out how that works. The logistics issue being I don't have anybody, like I can't be the one providing the service, which adds to the complexity of the whole thing. But I also know nothing about solar panels, so I feel like I would be feeling a bit insecure at first anyway, going and installing these systems. So beyond the point of having to find partners, there's also consumables that go into this, where you have to install the system, but then you have to make sure it works, and then you have to set it up and fill it with the right products that you need to refill. So there's like a cost. So if I were to charge $120 a month for this, it costs me at least $15 a month just in like consumables, and then on top of it I have a person that needs to go there to install and maintain the service a couple times a year. So doing all those math, my prompt clearly did not account for the fact that the numbers I gave it were supposed to be Canadian dollars. What I did when I built my ChatGPT prompt was I gave it the numbers from the washing machine, and I said, try and find something that would be the same or better as far as cost in terms of I want to be back in my money within less than 9 months. And it took that and then made it into the US, which adds, 30 to 40% depending on the day. So my cost, which was initially supposed to be 9 months, then became 13, 14 months. And I have no control over the install whatsoever. But I just kind of, for shits and giggles, I was like, let's see how I would go about this. And something that I really liked about selling to farmers was, because I've done it in the past, I did some cold calling for a company that was selling to winemakers, and they are pretty responsive on the phone. So that's kind of easy-ish as far as cold calling goes, I guess. And
here, and
you can
the first
find
thing I
them
see here
online
is this. This
really
is a massive
easily
solar
because
farm,
you can
obviously.
see
So
the
if you
solar
zoom in,
farms from the sky.
the quality is
So
not amazing,
you
but
can
you
go
can
on
see
Google
this
Maps
is
and then
probably
find the
way too big
farms.
for the
And
purpose of what I'm doing.
I
But
talked to a guy last
you
year who
could
was selling
literally
to
just
farmers who had
everywhere
grain
you look,
silos.
see
And so what he
some
would do is go on
farms
Google
have
Maps,
smaller ones,
find
and this
the
is
silos
all
on
in the
Google Map
same
and be like,
block.
oh, there's a
Like
silo
I
there,
just
and
show
figure
you
out who
there's
it
one
belonged to
here,
and call them.
and there's
Which
another one over there.
I could do the exact same thing for solar
then
panels.
right
And then if I had
above
someone
one,
who
here,
could,
there's
do cold calling
that's
for
not a
me, I
farm,
do
but
the
it looks like
documentation
one.
part.
But what's kind
And
of
I
cool is
basically
you could
become
kind of
the
see
person who puts everything together, which was kind of interesting. The flow of how this would be sold seems kind of cool. The main concerns I had were how liable are these people that I'm going to be end up working with, and building a relationship of trust with someone who becomes the face of your company when you haven't met them is kind of hard, I guess. So that was one of my concerns. So like the things I'm looking for in a business are how easy is it to sell? Like how clear is the distribution path for this? This one had something pretty solid. It's very reliable and it's a real need that I can fix. Based on the current electricity prices there, I figured out that if you were going to spend $120 for my services, you would be saving in electricity cost or generating electricity worth at least $250 to $300. So it's twice as much. And so I think the math really adds up. The value and the value proposition and the problem is a very solid one. I think the clients, I don't know how easy or hard they're going to be to sell to, but I have experience doing it in the past a little bit, so that makes me feel a bit more comfortable. So if I were to give this a ranking out of 10, I'd probably give it a solid 8 if it was in Montreal in Canadian dollars. But the fact that I have to, do this in another country and the complexity of setting up a business there and just like bank accounts and all of this admin stuff that I don't want to have to do, I'm going to dismiss it completely. But if you were in the US, I feel like you should totally look into that because, I really like this business. It's just a shame it's not here, honestly. So I'm going to modify my prompt, basically. Main takeaways for today are I'm going to modify my, so the main takeaways for today are basically I need to modify my prompt and make it that the business is something that I could do here to at least learn the ropes and then export it. Because I feel like complexity wise, regardless of what it is, if I could do it here and it's closer and having this physical element, even if I'm not the one providing the service and I work with some partners, having the opportunity to meet those people and build a relationship with them is going to go a long way. So I'm going to definitely try to prioritize that for now. And maybe I will come back to this eventually. But it was a really cool, I'm really happy I looked into it because I just got really excited that I was actually able to find something that could work out. And I feel like I just kind of needed this validation of they exist, So yeah, good progress, I guess. Something interesting that came up in the list, or I guess peaked, my fridge is doing this annoying noise. I would really like that thing to stop. Oh, it did, okay. So where's my tea?